The Galactic Council space station was filled with thousands of diplomats from across the known galaxy. Species of every shape and color walked through the massive halls, speaking in dozens of languages. It was the most important diplomatic summit in decades, and Princess Yara of the Velothi Empire stood at the center of it all. Yara was tall and elegant, with silver skin that shimmered under the station lights. Her violet eyes scanned the crowd with practiced calm as she moved through the gathering. She had been trained for this since birth, taught to carry herself with grace and authority. The Velothi were one of the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy, and she represented their future. A royal guard surrounded her in a perfect formation. They wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished gems. Each one was a veteran warrior, selected from the finest soldiers in the empire. But as Yara walked, her attention was drawn to someone else entirely. Standing near a security checkpoint was a human. He wore simple combat armor, dark and practical. His face was weathered and scarred, and his black hair was cut short in a military style. He held himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen countless battles. A patch on his shoulder identified him as Sergeant Junho Park, a mercenary contractor hired for station security. Yara felt something strange when she looked at him, a sense of familiarity that she could not explain. Had she met this human before? That seemed impossible. The Velothi rarely interacted with humans, considering them too primitive and aggressive to be worthy partners. Yet something about the way he stood, the way he watched the crowd, triggered a memory she could not quite reach. She pushed the feeling aside and continued toward the main assembly hall. The summit proceeded as expected for several hours. Representatives argued about trade routes and territorial disputes. Yara spoke on behalf of her father, the Emperor, presenting proposals with perfect diplomatic precision. But through it all, she found her eyes wandering to the security personnel along the walls. She spotted the human again. He was positioned near one of the secondary entrances, watching everything with intense focus. When their eyes met briefly, he looked away first. There was no recognition in his expression, no sign that he knew who she was beyond her title. Why did he feel so familiar? A memory surfaced unbidden. Yara was young again, barely 10 cycles old. She was on a transport ship, traveling through the border territories with a small escort. Then came the attack. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Plasma fire erupted everywhere. The slavers had come for her, knowing how valuable a Velothi princess would be. She remembered hiding in a cargo hold, trembling with fear. The door exploded inward, but instead of slavers, she saw a figure in battered armor. Human armor. He was bleeding from multiple wounds, but he stood between her and the doorway like an immovable wall. Close eyes, he had said in broken Velothi. I fix. Then everything went dark. Yara shook her head, pushing the memory away. The official record said a Velothi rescue team had saved her that day. The trauma had caused her to imagine things. That was what her father told her. That was what she had always believed. The assembly called for a recess, and Yara stepped out onto a viewing platform. The stars stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and cold. She needed a moment to clear her mind. She sensed movement behind her a fraction of a second before it happened. A figure lunged from the shadows, blade gleaming. Yara spun, her training taking over, but she knew she would not be fast enough. The assassin was too close, too quick. Then the human was there. Junho Park moved like lightning. He intercepted the attacker with brutal efficiency, grabbing the blade arm and twisting sharply. Bones cracked. The assassin screamed. In one fluid motion, Junho disarmed his opponent and drove him to the ground. 2 more attackers emerged from hiding. Junho did not hesitate. He engaged them both simultaneously, his movements precise and deadly. Within seconds, all three assassins were down, and Junho stood before Yara with his weapon raised, scanning for additional threats. Alarms finally began to sound. Security teams rushed toward their position, but the danger had already passed. Yara stared at the human in shock. He had moved faster than her own royal guards. He had put himself directly in the path of danger without a moment of hesitation. And now he stood there, breathing hard, with blood dripping from a cut on his arm. "Are you injured, Princess?" he asked, his voice. She knew that voice. "Why?" Yara demanded. "Why would you risk your life for me? You are a mercenary, a contractor. I mean nothing to you." Junho met her eyes for just a moment. Something flickered in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. "Old habit," he said simply. Then the security teams arrived, and Junho stepped back into the crowd of responders. He gave his report to the station commander with professional detachment, as if he had not just saved the life of one of the most important people in the galaxy. Yara watched him disappear into the chaos of the response. Her heart was pounding, and not just from the attack. She knew that voice. She knew those movements. The way he had positioned himself between her and danger. The way he had said those words. Old habit. What did that mean? She summoned her chief advisor, an elderly Velothi named Counselor Dayon. "I want everything you can find on that human," Yara commanded. Sergeant Junho Park. His service record, his history, everything. Dan looked surprised. "Your Highness, he is merely a human mercenary. Surely your attention would be better spent on—" "Do as I ask?" Yara interrupted. "This is not a request." The counselor bowed and hurried away. Yara looked out at the stars once more. Somewhere in her past, a human had saved her life. The official records denied it, but she knew the truth in her heart. And now, 15 years later, another human had done the same. Was it the same man? She intended to find out. 3 days had passed since the assassination attempt, and Princess Yara could not stop thinking about the human. She had barely slept, spending every spare moment digging through archives and classified files. The official investigation focused on identifying who had sent the assassins, but Yara had a different mystery to solve. She sat alone in her private quarters, surrounded by holographic displays. Military records, personnel files, and security footage floated around her like glowing ghosts. Counselor Dan had delivered everything he could find on Sergeant Junho Park, but most of it was useless. The human's file was thin, too thin for a man of his obvious skill. It listed basic information about his service in the Earth Alliance Marines and his subsequent career as a mercenary. But whole sections were blacked out, marked as classified by authorities that even Velothi intelligence could not access. What was he hiding? Yara pulled up the records from the attack 15 years ago. The official report was brief and clinical. It stated that her transport had been ambushed by slavers in the border territories. It claimed that a Velothi patrol had responded to the distress signal and rescued the princess before any harm could come to her. But Yara remembered differently. She remembered the terror of hiding in that cargo hold. She remembered the sounds of battle growing closer. And she remembered the human who had appeared like a guardian spirit, standing between her and death. She accessed the medical report from her rescue. Most of it was standard observations about her condition. But one detail caught her attention. Human blood had been found at the scene. The report dismissed it as contamination from the slavers' previous victims. But Yara knew better. She had seen her rescuer bleeding from multiple wounds. He had been human, and he had been hurt protecting her. She closed her eyes and let the memory wash over her. The cargo hold was dark and cold. Young Yara pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. She could hear screaming outside. plasma fire echoed through the corridors. Then came footsteps, heavy and uneven. The door exploded inward. A figure stood in the smoke and chaos. He was human, wearing armor that was scorched and dented. Blood covered his face and arms. He looked like he had fought through an army to reach her. "Princess?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. Yara was too frightened to speak. The human knelt before her, his movements gentle despite his terrifying appearance. He pulled off his helmet, revealing a young face with kind eyes. "I am Soldier," he said in broken Valathi. "Earth Alliance. I help you. Close eyes. I fix." Then he lifted her in his arms and carried her out of the cargo hold. She remembered the sounds of more fighting, the heat of plasma bolts passing nearby. She remembered pressing her face against his armored chest, squeezing her eyes shut just like he told her. Then nothing. When she woke, she was in a Valathi medical facility. Her father was there, along with dozens of advisors and guards. They told her she had been rescued by their own people. They told her the trauma had confused her memories. But now Yara knew the truth. She left her quarters and made her way to the lower levels of the station. This was where the contract security personnel were housed, far from the luxury of the diplomatic suites. The corridors here were narrow and utilitarian, designed for function rather than beauty. She found Junho in a small training room, practicing combat forms with mechanical precision. His movements were fluid and powerful, the result of decades of experience. Sweat covered his face, and old scars stood out against his skin. Yara studied those scars. Some were clearly from plasma weapons. Others looked like blade wounds. And there, on his left arm and across his neck, were burn marks that matched the pattern described in her medical report from 15 years ago. "Princess," Junho said, stopping his exercise. "You should not be here alone. It is not safe." "I want answers," Yara said. "Who are you really?" "I am a soldier," he replied. "Nothing more." "You were there," Yara pressed. 15 years ago, when my transport was attacked. You were the one who saved me." Junho's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I do not know what you mean, Princess." "Those scars." Yara pointed at the burns on his neck. "They match injuries described in the medical report from my rescue. Human blood was found at the scene. You fought through those slavers alone, did you not?" For a long moment, Junho said nothing. Then he turned away, reaching for a towel to wipe his face. "The past does not matter," he said quietly. "What matters is keeping you safe now." Before Yara could respond, alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed through the corridors. An automated voice announced a security breach on the diplomatic level. Multiple hostiles had infiltrated the station. Junho moved instantly. He grabbed his weapons and armor, donning them with practiced speed. His entire demeanor changed, shifting from guarded to deadly. "Stay behind me," he ordered. They moved through the corridors together, heading toward the sounds of combat. Plasma fire echoed from somewhere ahead. Screams and explosions filled the air. They rounded a corner and found a full team of assassins cutting through station security. There were at least a dozen of them, heavily armed and coordinated. They saw the princess and opened fire. Junho pushed Yora behind cover and engaged the enemy with terrifying ferocity. He moved like he had been born for battle, taking down one attacker after another. But there were too many. A plasma bolt streaked toward Yara. Junho saw it coming and threw himself into its path. The blast struck him in the chest, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard. But even as he fell, he raised his weapon and eliminated the shooter. Yara rushed to his side. Blood was spreading across his armor. His breathing was ragged and weak. "Junho!" she cried. He looked up at her with fading eyes. A sad smile crossed his face. "Close eyes," he whispered. "I fix." Then his eyes closed, and Yara screamed for help. The broadcast had gone out to every corner of the Velothi Empire. Billions of citizens watched as Princess Yara exposed her uncle's treachery. Loyal military forces were already mobilizing, racing toward the capital, but they were too far away. In the ceremonial hall, Yara and Junho stood back to back, surrounded by enemies. Vorath's soldiers closed in from every direction, their weapons gleaming in the light. The Duke himself watched from his elevated position, confident in his victory. "Kill them," Vorath ordered. "Kill them both." Junho raised his weapons and prepared for the end. He was wounded and exhausted. His armor cracked and smoking, but his eyes burned with determination. "Stay behind me," he told Yara. "I will hold them as long as I can." "No," Yara replied firmly. "I am done hiding while others protect me. We fight together." The soldiers attacked in waves. Junho met them with devastating force, cutting through their ranks like a storm of destruction. His movements were slower than before, his wounds taking their toll. But still he fought with everything he had. Yara fought beside him, using skills she had learned but never truly tested. She was not as strong or experienced as Junho, but she refused to be helpless. Every enemy she struck down was one less for him to face. The nobles cowering in the corner watched in disbelief. They had mocked this human, called him primitive and savage. Now they saw the truth. They saw a warrior who fought with honor and courage, standing against impossible odds to protect their princess. Minutes passed like hours, bodies piled around them. Junho and Yara held their ground, refusing to fall. But the numbers were too great. A soldier struck Yara with the butt of his rifle, knocking her to the ground. Another kicked Junho's legs out from under him. Within seconds, they were both pinned down, weapons pressed against their heads. Vorath descended from his platform, smiling with cruel satisfaction. "How touching," he mocked. "The princess and her pet human dying together. This will make an excellent lesson for anyone who thinks to oppose me." He drew his ceremonial blade, a weapon passed down through generations of the royal family. "I will kill you myself," he told Yara, just as I should have done 15 years ago. Junho struggled against the soldiers holding him. "Let her go. Take me instead." Vorath laughed. "Why would I do that? You are nothing. A primitive creature from a primitive world. History will forget you ever existed." He raised the blade above Yara's heart. Then the windows exploded. Loyalist gunships burst through the crystalline walls, their weapons blazing. Soldiers in imperial colors rappelled into the hall, engaging Vorath's forces with overwhelming firepower. The broadcast had worked. Help had arrived. The soldiers holding Junho and Yara scattered, trying to defend against the new threat. Junho was on his feet instantly, grabbing a fallen weapon. "Protect the princess," the loyalist commander shouted, but Junho was already doing exactly that. He cut a path through the chaos, heading straight for Vorath. The Duke tried to flee, but his escape routes were blocked. Loyalist forces were pouring in from every direction. Vorath turned to face Junho, blade still in hand. "You think you can defeat me, human?" He snarled. "I have trained in combat since before your species learned to make fire." Junho said nothing. He attacked with brutal efficiency, driving Vorath backward with a relentless assault. The Duke was skilled, but he had never faced an opponent like this. He had never faced a human who refused to give up. Their blades clashed again and again. Vorath struck Junho with a vicious slash across the chest. Blood sprayed, but Junho did not stop. He kept advancing, kept fighting, ignoring wounds that would have killed a lesser being. "What are you?" Vorath gasped. "I am human," Junho replied. He disarmed Vorath with a twist of his blade and knocked him to the ground. The Duke lay helpless, staring up at the bloody human who had destroyed everything he had built. Junho raised his weapon for the killing blow. "Wait!" Yara shouted. She approached slowly, stepping over fallen soldiers to reach them. Her eyes were fixed on her uncle, the man who had tried to kill her twice, who had murdered her guards, who had betrayed his own family for power. "He deserves death," she said quietly. "But he will face justice instead. Let him live to see his disgrace." Junho hesitated. Every instinct told him to end the threat permanently. But he saw the resolve in Yara's eyes, and he lowered his weapon. "As you wish, princess." Vorith was taken into custody, screening threats and curses. His remaining soldiers surrendered when they saw their leader in chains. The coup was over. The emperor, shaken but unharmed, embraced his daughter with tears in his eyes. "You saved us all," he whispered. "You and your human." 1 week later, the Empire gathered for a different ceremony. This time, there were no hidden soldiers, no treacherous plots. The ceremonial hall had been repaired, and every noble house was present to witness something unprecedented. Princess Yara stood before the assembled court, dressed in the formal robes of the royal family. Beside her knelt Junho Park, wearing armor repaired and polished to perfection. "This man saved my life," Yara announced. "Not once, but twice. He fought through impossible odds when I was a child. Then again when my own family betrayed me. He asked for no reward, no recognition. He acted because it was right." She turned to face the crowd. "Today, I name Sergeant Junho Park as my sworn brother, a member of the royal house. He will carry our name and our protection for the rest of his days." Gasps rippled through the court. A human in the royal family? It was unthinkable, but no one dared to object. They had all seen what this human could do. They had seen his courage, his loyalty, his refusal to surrender even when hope was lost. The emperor stepped forward and placed a medallion around Junho's neck. "Rise, brother," Yara said with a smile. Junho stood, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. He had never wanted recognition. He had never wanted rewards. He had only wanted to protect the innocent. "Thank you," he said simply. "I will serve with honor." As the ceremony concluded, representatives from other species watched with newfound respect. The humans were young and primitive, they had said. The humans were savages with nothing to offer. They had been wrong. One human had changed the course of an empire. One human had shown what his species was truly capable of. And across the galaxy, others began to wonder what else humanity might accomplish. The medical bay hummed with the sound of life support machines. Doctors and nurses rushed around, shouting orders and preparing emergency procedures. In the center of it all, Sergeant Junho Park lay unconscious on a surgical table, fighting for his life. Princess Yara stood in the corner, refusing to leave. Her royal advisors had tried to remove her, arguing that a princess should not concern herself with the fate of a human mercenary. She had silenced them with a single look. "He saved my life," she said coldly. "I will not abandon him." The lead surgeon, a Velothi doctor named Mira, worked with desperate focus. The plasma bolt had caused severe internal damage. Human anatomy was different from Velothi, making the surgery even more complicated. "His heart is strong," Dr. Mira reported. "Humans are remarkably resilient creatures, but the damage is extensive." Yara watched as they worked. She could not stop thinking about those words he had spoken before losing consciousness. "Close eyes, I fix." The same words. The exact same words from 15 years ago. There was no doubt left in her mind. Junho Park was the mysterious soldier who had saved her as a child. But why had he hidden the truth? Why had he spent 15 years in silence? Hours passed. The surgery was long and difficult, but Dr. Mira, finally stepped back with a tired smile. "He will survive," she announced. "Humans are extraordinarily hard to kill. He should regain consciousness within a few hours." Yara felt relief flood through her body. She thanked the doctor and asked to be left alone with the patient. The medical staff exchanged uncertain looks but obeyed. When the room was empty, Yara approached Junho's bedside. He looked peaceful in sleep, the lines of tension gone from his face. She could see the young soldier he had once been, kind eyes behind a mask of blood and determination. She noticed a small bag among his personal effects. With careful hands, she opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was worn and faded, clearly carried for many years. The image showed a young human soldier in damaged armor, carrying a small Velothi child in his arms. The child's face was pressed against his chest, eyes squeezed shut. The soldier was bleeding from countless wounds, but his expression showed only gentle determination. It was her. Yara recognized herself as that frightened little girl. Tears filled her eyes. He had kept this photograph for 15 years. He had carried the memory of that day everywhere he went. And she had never known. She had believed the lies her father told her, dismissing her own memories as trauma-induced fantasy. Yara sat beside the bed and waited. Junho woke slowly, his eyes flickering open with confusion. He saw the medical equipment around him and understood immediately where he was. Then he saw Yara, and his expression shifted to something unreadable. "You should not be here," he said, his voice weak. "I found your photograph," Yara replied simply. Junho closed his eyes. He looked tired beyond measure, carrying the weight of secrets too long kept. "Tell me the truth," Yara pleaded. "All of it. You were there that day, were you not? You saved my life when I was a child." For a long moment, Junho was silent. Then he began to speak. "I was a Marine," he said. "Earth Alliance, serving on a patrol ship near the border territories. We responded to your distress signal, but my ship was destroyed in the initial engagement. I was the only survivor." Yara listened in silence. "I crashed on the same planetoid where your transport had been forced down. I found slavers everywhere, dozens of them. They had already killed most of your escort. I knew they were searching for something valuable. For me," Yara whispered. Junho nodded. "I fought through them. I do not remember how many I killed. My armor was failing, my weapons were nearly depleted. But I kept moving. I had to find what they were looking for before they did. And you found me in that cargo hold. You were so small," Junho said, his voice breaking slightly. "So frightened. You looked at me like I was a monster. I tried to tell you I was there to help, but my Velothi was terrible. All I could say was to close your eyes and that I would fix everything." Tears streamed down Yara's face. "I carried you for 2 days," Junho continued. "Across hostile terrain, with slavers, hunting us the entire way. You barely woke during the journey. I kept you hidden, kept you safe. When I finally reached a Velothi patrol, I handed you to them and disappeared into the wilderness." "Why?" Yara demanded. "Why did you leave? Why did you not stay to receive recognition for what you did?" Junho turned his head away. "I was nobody. A stranded Marine from a species your people considered primitive. I knew they would not believe me. I knew they would take credit for the rescue and dismiss my involvement. So I left before they could erase me." "But you came back," Yara said. "You became a mercenary and worked your way into my security detail. You have been watching over me, have you not? All these years." Junho was quiet for a long time. "I could not forget you," he finally admitted. "That little girl who trusted a bloody stranger to keep her safe. I became a mercenary because it gave me freedom to move. I took contracts that brought me close to you, always watching from the shadows. I never expected you to recognize me. Yara took his hand. You saved my life twice now. Why? What do you gain from protecting me? Junho looked at her with eyes full of emotion. Nothing, he said. I do it because it is right. I do it because protecting the innocent is what humans do. We do not need rewards or recognition. We just see someone who needs help, and we help. Yara squeezed his hand. Then let me help you now. Someone wants me dead, and you are the only one I trust. Will you stand with me? Junho smiled weakly. Always, princess. Until my last breath. Outside the medical bay, Counselor Dayan approached with urgent news. Intelligence had traced the assassination attempts. The conspiracy led directly to the Velothi royal court itself. The enemy was closer than anyone had imagined. The Velothi homeworld was magnificent beyond description. Its cities floated among the clouds, connected by bridges of crystallized light. Towers of silver and gold stretched toward the heavens, monuments to an empire that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. And at the heart of it all stood the imperial palace, ancient and eternal. Princess Yara's shuttle descended through the clouds, carrying her home for the first time in months. But this was not a joyful return. She came bearing knowledge of betrayal, and she brought with her the one person she trusted above all others. Junho stood beside her, fully recovered from his wounds. He wore formal armor now, marked with the insignia of the princess's personal guard. The Velothi court would be outraged to see a human in such a position, but Yara no longer cared what they thought. Are you ready for this? Junho asked. No, Yara admitted, but I have no choice. The conspiracy must be exposed. The intelligence gathered by Counselor Dayan had revealed a terrible truth. Both assassination attempts had been orchestrated by Duke Vorath, Yara's own uncle. He was next in line for the throne after her, and he had grown tired of waiting. 15 years ago, he had arranged for slavers to kidnap her. When that failed, he had tried again with hired assassins. Her own family wanted her dead. The shuttle landed in the palace courtyard, and Yara stepped out to face a crowd of nobles and officials. They had gathered to welcome the princess home, but their expressions quickly shifted to shock and disgust when they saw her companion. What is this outrage? Demanded Lord Hyun-Soo, a senior advisor to the emperor. You bring a human into the sacred palace? Sergeant Park is my personal guard, Yara declared. He has proven his loyalty with blood. I trust him more than anyone in this court. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. The Velothi had always viewed humans as inferior creatures, useful only as laborers and soldiers. The idea of one serving so close to royalty was scandalous. Duke Vorath pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with false concern. He was tall and elegant, with the same silver skin and violet eyes as Yara. But where her eyes held warmth, his were cold and calculating. My dear niece, he said smoothly, we were so worried when we heard about the attacks. Thank the ancestors you are safe. Yara forced herself to smile. Thank you, uncle. Your concern is touching. She could not confront him here. Not yet. She needed evidence that the court would accept, not just the word of a human mercenary and a young princess. Vorath was powerful and respected. Exposing him would require careful planning. The days that followed were tense and dangerous. Yara attended court functions while secretly gathering allies. Counselor Dayan worked to find concrete proof of Vorath's treachery, and Junho watched everything, never leaving the princess's side. The nobles mocked him constantly. They called him primitive, savage, animal. Some deliberately bumped into him or spilt drinks on his armor. Junho endured every insult in silence, his expression never changing. How do you stand it? Yara asked him one evening. Their cruelty never stops. "Words cannot hurt me," Junho replied. "I have faced much worse than aristocratic contempt. What matters is keeping you safe." Yara felt a surge of admiration for this humble human. He had every reason to hate her people, yet he remained loyal and steadfast. His strength was not just physical. It was strength of character that the nobles could never understand. Then came the night of the imperial ceremony. It was the most important event of the year, celebrating the founding of the Velothi Empire. Every noble house would be present, along with the emperor himself. Yara saw it as her opportunity to expose Vorath before the entire court. But Vorath had plans of his own. The ceremony began with traditional music and elaborate displays of light. The emperor, old and frail, sat upon his throne and watched with tired eyes. Yara stood nearby, waiting for the right moment to speak. She never got the chance. Soldiers poured into the ceremonial hall through every entrance. They wore the colors of House Vorath, armed with plasma weapons and energy blades. Within seconds, they had surrounded the emperor and the assembled nobles. "What is the meaning of this?" the emperor demanded. Vorath stepped forward, no longer hiding behind his mask of courtesy. "Forgive me, brother," he said coldly, "but your reign has lasted long enough. Your daughter has been corrupted by human influence, proving herself unfit to inherit. The empire needs strong leadership, and I will provide it." Screams filled the hall as nobles tried to flee. Vorath soldiers blocked every exit, herding everyone into the center of the room. The palace guards had been neutralized, bribed, or killed before the ceremony began. "You orchestrated everything," Yara accused. "The kidnapping when I was a child. The assassination attempts. All of it was you." Vorath laughed. "Of course it was me. I have been planning this for decades. You should have died 15 years ago, but some human soldier interfered. I made sure to bury the truth, but you just had to keep digging." He gestured toward Junho with contempt. "And now you bring another human into my home. Perhaps I should thank him. Your attachment to this creature has convinced many nobles that you are unfit to rule." Junho stepped forward, putting himself between Yara and the surrounding soldiers. "Let the princess go," he said calmly. "This is between you and the throne." Vorath sneered. "You are in no position to make demands, human. My soldiers outnumber you 100 to 1. Even your primitive species cannot fight those odds." Junho drew his weapons. "Watch me," he said. The first soldier attacked, and Junho moved like lightning. He cut down one enemy after another, his movements precise and deadly. But Vorath was right. There were too many. For every soldier that fell, 3 more took his place. Yara grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and joined the fight. She would not let Junho face this alone. Not again. Together they battled toward the broadcast system. If they could reach it, they could expose Vorath's crimes to the entire empire. A soldier struck Junho from behind, sending him to his knees. Blood streamed from a wound on his head. But still he fought, refusing to surrender. Yara reached the controls and activated the broadcast. "People of the Velothi Empire," she shouted. "Duke Vorath has committed treason. He attempts to overthrow the emperor. All loyal forces respond." Vorath screamed in rage and ordered his soldiers to kill them both. The final battle had begun.